Thank you for taking part in the Joy Project with this interview.
What is your name?
My name is Kaleem Anwar.
And where were you born?
I was born in Pakistan, in Punjab.
Why did you come to Britain?
I didn't come here by choice. I was brought over here when I was only 4 years old. I came to join my father, who was already here.
What year did you first arrive in Britain?
1966.
What was life like in Pakistan before you left?
Well, I was too young. Very, very vague memories of Pakistan. But I remember, a few things. Life was slow pace. There were very few motor cars in the town and very few buses. And I don't remember my journey. I was only 4 years old, so I remember being put in a car.
Yeah.
And then the car was driven obviously by a driver who took us to the airport, to Lahore, about 40 miles away. And then I got on a plane. And then I remember sitting on Karachi airport in the evening, waiting for the flight to London. And I was sitting near a fish tank. And that fish tank at the age of 4, it's a vivid memory. I remember looking at those fish at that time, waiting.
Yeah. What were your early memories about living in the UK?
I remember going to a primary school in Manchester. That's where we lived.
Yeah.
Still live in Manchester. And the school was called Plymouth Grove Primary School. That's in the Longside area of Manchester. And I used to walk to school. My mum used to walk me to school and then come and collect me from school. And I remember very well, there's a children's play area very near to the school, and we used to go and get on swings and slides in that park. That used to be really nice when the weather was dry. We used to get out there and get to the park. And it used to get very smoggy in winter times in those days, because there were a lot of chimneys around still, in Manchester. It was textile industry, and chimneys used to let a lot of smoke out, and winter time used to get so foggy, when walking to school in those days, it was very hard to see where you're going. This is how bad it used to be. And it used to snow heavily as well. I remember, snow above my knees, but I was small at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but heavy snow and very cold weather. But luckily the house we lived in, I think we were one of the lucky fews who had a bathroom and toilet inside. I was very lucky in those days. Otherwise, I remember people who used to have a toilet in the backyard of their house, and they used to go down to the public baths, Victoria baths on Heathersay Road nearby, to have a bath once a week.
Yeah.
So we were very lucky.
Who did you leave behind when you came to the UK?
No one of immediate family, because my mother, me, and we both came to join my father. Then my brother was born over here.
Do you return to Pakistan, and how many times have you returned, if you have?
Every few years. Last time I went was in 2010 to attend a wedding of one of my cousin's son, and he actually lives here, so 23 of us went over there because he was getting married to a girl he really, really fell in love with over there, who went to college with him. So both of them decided they wanted to get married in Pakistan, so we went over there to get married.
Where have you lived in Britain?
Manchester. And when I was a child, I used to live around Victoria Park. If you know where the Manchester Royal Infirmary is.
Yeah. Oxford Road.
Upper Brook Street, between Upper Brook Street and Oxford Road, yeah?
Yeah.
And we used to live off Upper Brook Street in those days. But then later on we moved to Old Trafford. And
What memories was it?
Sorry, carry on, don't worry. What memories does his father have of Britain when he first arrived?
What memories do your father have of coming to Britain?
well, my father's brother was already here, and he had come via Cyprus. And my father's brother used to work in Cyprus with the British armies over there. Because if you know, British Army's got a base in Cyprus, yeah? So he was there on the base. And then one day he decided, okay, why not go and, take some time out, a few weeks, and have a look at what England is like. So he came over here, and it cost him £37 for the air ticket from Cyprus to London. He bought that, and he didn't have any intention to stay. So he came over, and at the airport in London, Heathrow Airport, when he came to the desk, immigration passport desk, the officer asked him how long was he going to stay. He said maybe 2-3 weeks. But the officer said, I hope you stay longer, because we need you. So anyway, he came over and to Manchester, then went to Bolton, because his friends lived over there. And while he was with them, they said, by the way, Kendal in Manchester is a big departmental store. It's called Fraser's now in Deansgate. They are looking for professional tailors. And anyway, he went to Kendal, he started a job there. Then my father came and joined him. And they both worked in the clothing industry until the clothing industry went to decline in the late 70s. And this was a Wednesday afternoon. He went in there into the suit department, men's suits department, yeah? And the manager said, okay, let's can you do alterations to trousers and blazers and jackets? He said, yes, no problem. He said, okay, yeah, here's a couple of blazers and a few trousers. Can you carry the work on them? He did. And the manager said, oh, that's fantastic. You did it really quick. What are you doing for the rest of the day? And my uncle said, nothing really, I'm free. He said, well, why don't you carry on then? And my uncle carried on working that day. And at the end of the day, he said to the manager, okay, what do you think? Should I come tomorrow or no? Manager said, no, you come tomorrow and you carry on. So on Friday, when it came for the weekly wage packet, you know, they used to give wage packets in those days. The manager gave him the wage packet, and my uncle looked at the wage packet, and it was a full week's wages in there. And he asked the manager, why have you given me full week's wages when I've only worked 3 days? The manager said, oh, it's our policy, the company policy. No matter which day you start work, on your first week you get a full week's pay. So that's what happened to my dad as well. He came over because he was a professional tailor. It wasn't hard for him to find a job. And there was, clothing industry thriving in Manchester at the time. You know, it was a big fashion house, plenty of jobs if you were, professional tailor. And he never had problem looking for work. So this is what made him stay here, because there was plenty of work to do. And he actually ended up managing a factory where they made trousers. It was called Corey Best, very famous factory in Manchester who made, suits and trousers.
Yeah. How long did he do that for then?
Oh, he did it for at least 25 years. How long?
For the rest of your life, or do you hope eventually to return to live in the country of birth? What would stop you for returning home to stay?
Well, if you look at my history, I have spent almost all my life in this country. I came here when I was only 4. So, in fact, I grew up here. I studied here, I worked here, and my life is very much, attached to this country. So I can't really see myself going away from this country for a longer period other than just going for a holiday. And that's what I do at the moment. Whenever I go away, it's for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then I come back home because Manchester is my home. And not only my home, my children are born and bred in Manchester, so it is their home too. So it's very, very hard to think detaching myself from Manchester or Britain, in other words, because my life is here. I don't know much about any other country. It'd be very, very hard for me to, go and settle in another country. You may have seen some people, who venture out, the expatriates who go and buy a place somewhere in Spain.
Yeah.
And they go and live there when they retire. But because of my life, my children, everyone is still here in Britain. So I can't even think of doing that. But I do like the sun, and I do like to go, have a few weeks off every year, whenever I can afford, to somewhere, go somewhere warm.
Have you ever experienced hostility or racial discrimination from white people?
Yes, I have. When I was a child, there were very few Asian heritage people in Manchester. My father and then our family were one of the very few early arrivals in the 60s. And it was a small community. And when we went to school, I remember in the school playground, the other kids, white kids, some of them were fine, some of them weren't fine. And I believe you get good and bad everywhere. So just like that, some of those kids didn't like me or like us. And there were other kids who got on really well with us. And some of them went on to school with us, secondary school afterwards, college, and lifetime friendships developed. But at the same time, I remember in the 70s when the East African Asians were kicked out by Idi Amin from Uganda and also from Kenya as well. When they came over here, I found that certainly there was a lot more hostility towards people like me. And suddenly I became a Paki. Before that I never knew the word, what it meant. And then this became, a normal term. The white people who were anti-Asians started using it against people like me. So I have vivid memories, especially in those days. The National Front became very active in the 70s. But what we did, because I was growing up as well, I must have been around 16, 17 at the time, and because of the hostility we were facing from certain white people who associated with National Front, we set up our own organisation called Asian Youth Movement. And what we used to do is to protect our community. We used to walk the streets and in the evenings in Longside area and make sure that, you know, the National Front thugs don't come around Longside and, you know, smash people's properties or you know, intimidate people or assault people, because it was becoming, you know, a common occurrence. The National Front thugs will come from Hyde, that side, into Longside area and Victoria Park area, and they will pick on elderlies especially. They will beat up the elderly people. They would, you know, throw rubbish through the letterboxes. And when we started, you know, organising ourselves into a movement to protect our own communities, things got better. And it also gave us a voice. We organised ourselves, we fought for our rights, and then in the early 80s, I remember, I think around 81, we set up the very first youth club in Longside, in an old library on Stockport Road. And that was the start of me getting involved into youth work. I was a young person, very active young person myself at the time, and we started organising activities for our age groups. Then we became volunteers, running it all on voluntary basis. Then we became trained and paid workers, and that was the start for me to, you know, start working with young people. It's a long time ago, but it was very good experience. Being able to, you know, find other young people who were like-minded and setting up an organisation that stood for something. Where we lived in Manchester, in Victoria Park, on Upper Brook Street, first there were no Asian grocery shops anywhere. And then one guy opened a grocery shop in Victoria Park on Upper Brook Street at a walking distance from us, because a few families lived around there. And he thought, okay, this would be a good idea, I'll open a shop here. And he started selling Asian groceries and also halal meat. And he used to bring his Asian grocery from Bradford, because Bradford had a bigger community in those days, in the 60s. And that's where the grocery used to come. And there was no restaurant anywhere in Manchester area that we knew of, you know, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. There was no restaurant whatsoever. So any food we made, it was made at home. But then one guy opened up a restaurant called Ghulam Restaurant on Windsor Road. I remember that, you know, I was only young, very little at the time. And that was the very first Asian restaurant opened up on Windsor Road. Then another one opened, and that was called Sanam. Not the big new Sanam, the old Sanam with a green sign, and that is still there. That was the second one. It's called Sanam Sweet and Restaurant, not Sweet House. The big one is called the Sweet House. And two brothers started doing business from there. So these were the very, very first two restaurants on that road. Very, very first. And then a clothing shop opened called Chunni's on the same road. Then another grocery shop opened there. Then another one opened there. Another restaurant opened there. That was only the beginning. And then over the years, I remember even in the up to the late 70s, there must have been only 3 restaurants on that road. And the other one was Rushdon Chippy. And that Rushdon Chippy is still there. And that was run by an Iranian, making kabidas. That's a very old place as well. So in those days there were very, very few.
Is there any advice you'd like to give to the future generation of young people?
You're still very young, 15, 14, 15, 16, that age group, yeah. One thing I must stress on you, don't ever underestimate your education. Because if anything, it's education that is the key for your future successes. If you come out of school with good GCSEs, then you stand a better chance to do A-levels.
Yeah.
If you come out with good A-levels, then you stand a better chance of going to one of the Russell Group universities. When I say Russell Group universities, I mean the top universities. The universities that are recognised all over the world. And don't ever underestimate this country's education establishment. It's very historical. There is abundance of knowledge. It's all at your fingertips. What you got to do is work hard to attain that knowledge, and then work to acquire the skills that go along with it, to become professionals, to become skilled people. And the world out there is very, very hard competition now. But people who are professional, who are skilled, who come out with good education from good universities, there will never be shortage of jobs for them. But people who don't pay attention to their GCSEs, to their A-levels, or apprenticeships, there's another route as well.
Yeah.
But whichever route you take, you've got to do really well in that. But you must focus on your future and have that determination to believe that I want to be this. You can't be everything, but you can be best in one thing. Just try and get that sort of mental framework. No matter what you do, it could be anything. It could be even down to, making a pin. But if you are best at making that pin, there'll be never shortage of work for you. So be best, the best at whatever you do. That should be your aim.
Well, thanks for your advice.
Thank you, Kaleem, for all your advice and what you've said.
It's a pleasure.